You're watching World Championship Wreckage, professional wrestling history the way the fans remember. Brought to you by Rivet City Radio and the World Championship Wreckage YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Today's episode.
Whoa, 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 whoa. It's season 2, baby. We're changing it up. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Wreckage here on the World Championship Wreckage YouTube channel. As always, I am your friendly neighborhood dad hat wearing wrestling fan. Join with me today, you know him, you love him, from Cole TV, XLJ the OG. Hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm good. We are, it's just a two-man booth today. Will, at the time of recording, he's actually live doing bot spots and share shots over at Rivet City Radio. Go give them a subscribe over on, Twitch and here on YouTube and all the places that you subscribe and everything. And also give us a like and a thumbs up and a comment and subscribe here as well. Appreciate everybody. Like, we've been having a lot of comments lately on the channel, which I appreciate. But
we love the engagement.
Yes, we do. We love the engagement. Because that just gives us an idea of what you guys are digging and what you want to see more of. So today it's your pick. You're leading the chart, and you look so giddy. You look so happy right now.
I am.
We are going to be talking about, it was your choice, the Clash of the Champions.
Let's go. Yes.
WCW's answer to WrestleMania.
Yes, and that's part of what I love about this is the origin story of the Clash of the Champions, because it's a great one, I think. But first and foremost, DadHat, before we get too deep into this, I gotta ask you, when we first say Clash of the Champions, what's some of the first things that come to mind?
The entrance.
Yeah, it was like
shiny,
so tacky, but great.
The shiny curtains that just opened with like dry ice coming through, and people like it was flashy in terms of color and like shininess, but it wasn't like a big elaborate set or anything. It never, I mean, as big as they were trying to present it, I mean, because you hear WrestleMania now and you see the scale they're on, but even when you look back at like the early WrestleManias and everything, it still felt so big, even though they're in regular, arenas. This has always felt it held on to that, as Will would say, that Southern wrestling, intimate, like the entrance might be bright and shiny, but it still had that kind of dark feel, weird. WCW was like we're that legitimate, like this is us. We're going to have a fight. Like, you're going to see violence still. But yeah, if you say Clash of Champions, that's when you said it last week when you wanted to do that. My first thought was, oh, the damn entrance.
That's amazing. I love the aesthetics of it. Oh, yes.
And Battle Bowl.
Oh, okay.
Because don't they? I am getting these right? Battle Bowl was done at Clash of Champions.
I don't think they did do a Battle Bowl at Clash of Champions.
I thought Battle Bowl was. Maybe I was wrong.
But they did do one thing that they did do at Clash of Champions. A lot of it was used as like a prelude to the pay-per-views.
That's right.
Back in the day. So probably maybe some Battle Bowl qualifying matches probably occurred over the years. I can't recall off the top of my head, but nonetheless. But no, like I say, everything you said, like with the aesthetics of it, the feeling of it and stuff, is great. But the origin story is what I find the most fascinating with the DadHat. So we have to go all the way back to the year 1987.
I was 2.
And oh, was it? Yes, you were 2, and
I was
I
2.
was 3-ish, somewhere. Yeah, 3. Anyways, and we're going way back, kiddos, to when like pay-per-views was just becoming a thing, because at this point, like really, it was still closed circuit television. If you look back in the history of professional wrestling, the first actual wrestling pay-per-view was the Wrestling Classic. And then the WWF did WrestleMania 3 on pay-per-view with great success, and they wanted to follow that up. Thus, we fast forward all the way to November of 1987. But as we all know, as longtime NWA fans, November, especially Thanksgiving, DadHat, that was always the show, the granddaddy of them all. Starrcade was always held on that day. So at this point, Crockett had just really experimented with like closed circuit television and was finally going to throw their hat into the ring with pay-per-views. And Starrcade 87 was slated to be their first actual pay-per-view. Now, that all being said, of course, petty Vince McMahon comes in and is like, you know what? I'm going to have a pay-per-view, and I'm going to do it on Thanksgiving too, because I want the Thanksgiving night tradition. And thus, the Survivor Series was born. So here we have, for the first time in wrestling history, really this predates like Monday Night Wars, anything. This is the first real time where like a scheduling conflict is an issue. Now, where it gets really petty is the fact that Vince McMahon threatened all the pay-per-view providers that if they did not show Survivor Series, they would not get WrestleMania 4 the year to follow. And that caused a lot of satellite companies and pay-per-view providers to go ahead and poll doing Starrcade. I forget what the exact number is, but it was like a freaking dramatic, like 80% or something like that, I believe it was, that actually did not show Starrcade 87 on pay-per-view because of this. So Vince McMahon being petty, imagine that. But we don't stop there. Oh, no. As we fast forward into 1988, the NWA is going to do another pay-per-view, the Bunkhouse Stampede, in January of 1988. But once again, Vince McMahon's like, oh, no. I am not going to let you get those pay-per-view numbers, so I am going to have the Royal Rumble. But pay-per-view satellite providers and whatnot came back and said, no, we're not going to allow you to monopolize this shit.
Yeah.
And essentially said, like, we're going to be able to carry both. And then Vince came back with the very first Royal Rumble was actually held on the USA Network. It was given away for free, but he did it out of spite just to go up against Crockett and their pay-per-views. So at this point, Crockett's had enough. And they're like, you know what? Fuck it. So WrestleMania 4 is coming around the corner in April. Obviously, WWE's biggest show of the year. And they decide, you know what? We're going to do our own show. And guess what? We're going to put it on for free. And thus, the Clash of the Champions is born, which I just love that it was born out of spite, was something amazing, incredible, and that would last for, I believe there was a total of 35 Clash of the Champions. Can you believe that? In such a short time span, too, because you got to keep in mind, clashes weren't done like just every year or something like that. They do them like every 3 months or 4 months or something like that.
Yeah.
Especially initially early on, they did them quite frequently.
To put it into perspective, you said the first one was held in, you said what, 88?
88.
88? Okay. You hear 1988, right? Believe it or not, there was a Clash of the Champions where the New World Order was part of it.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, that's a long time away.
And it actually, the 35, Clash of Champions 35 actually would take place, I believe it was 1997. So you think of that time span from 88 to 97, they crammed 35 clashes in, which is crazy to think. But man, oh man, I am glad they did. because I think for me personally, as a wrestling fan, what I enjoyed the most is I didn't have to pay a dime for it. It was like, yes.
Nope.
And I mean, these were pay-per-view quality cards that they were putting on too. Like this wasn't just like, let's
big
throw
names.
some,
I mean, they're mainstays. They're big ones. I mean,
and there's some great moments throughout the Clash of Champions, which we're going to talk about on this episode. But Clash of Champions 1, we all know the significance of it. We all know why it's so special. It is the birth of, I believe, you and mine favorite wrestler of all time, the icon, the man called Sting. I mean,
you mean this big image? And by the way, this is a DVD that is available. Like,
there you go. You can get a best of Clash of the Champions DVD compilation from the WWE if you go to your secondhand stores now, because physical media is practically dead. Wah, wah, wah. I hate that.
yeah,
I bet it's on Peacock. I'm sure you could probably watch it on Peacock.
I bet it is. I think I've seen it.
Yeah. But nonetheless, like it's the birth of Sting. This is where Sting officially gets put on the map. They put him in the main event. And it's interesting too to think about, because like obviously, okay, we're going up against the WWF. It's their biggest show of the year. What is the biggest thing that we can do? And I mean, at that point, DadHat, I mean, Sting, I mean, he was a pretty popular babyface, but he wasn't to the heights of like, okay,
a Flair.
Of a Flair. This is our main event guy. This is the next guy we're going to strap our company to. Like, he wasn't nearly there yet. But this matchup single-handedly put him in that conversation.
Well, it also did something that WWE wasn't doing at the time. It was a freaking 60-minute draw.
Mm-hmm. I actually went 45, but yeah.
45, yeah. Sorry, yeah. I think draw. I hear.
It's okay. Yep, I do the same.
But like, still, it's not like WWE's not doing that.
Right. Yeah, no. Like, hell no. Like, what? Like, their guys have, like, going 10 minutes at best, But, yeah, I mean, it's just, it's the thing is, NWA, I think in this time frame, they knew what they had. They knew what their product was. And they focused on their strong suits. They knew they weren't going to be able to compete with the WWF as far as the theatrics, as far as the overall presentation. But what you were going to get, like you alluded to earlier, is good old-fashioned Southern wrestling, which we freaking love, man. But for putting this match on in the main event, putting this at a 45-minute draw, showing Sting could hang with Ric Flair. I mean, if you look back in the history of professional wrestling, you could argue this may be single-handedly the biggest star-making performance on television. If there was it for free.
It was a match that you can tell based on the commentary, you can base on what's going on. Even if you watch it today, it's like, even if you know, I mean, we know the legacy that is Sting. You watch that match and you're like, you just still feel that he went from here, he's here now.
Yeah. It's just it's crazy to think, and I wanna throw this question at you, because I think this is very fascinating. Because as we've established, this occurred the same night as WrestleMania 4. WrestleMania 4 was a very important event in the history of professional wrestling, because at this time frame in the WWF, it is all landscape of giants. It is all about Hulk Hogan and the Andre the Giant rivalry. WrestleMania 4 was the crowning moment of Macho Man Randy Savage, where now he has arrived into the main event scene.
Yeah.
That being said, DadHat, I want to ask you this. They happened on the same night. Which do you think was more impactful for each company? The Macho Man winning the WWF title in the 16-man elimination tournament, or Sting going 45 minutes with Flair at the Clash?
It's hard because those are my two favorite of all time. Like,
right?
Like, I mean, like, even though I grew up on WCW and the NWA, like, the little bit that I knew about WWE, like, I was never a Hogan guy. Fuck you, Terry.
Fuck you, Terry.
I was a Savage guy. And even as I got older and then I went back, I still always gravitated towards Savage. I honestly want to say, as important as it was for Savage to win that title and, be out of the shadow of Hogan. I really think that the match for Sting, because the way I look at it is Sting became an anchor for the NWA and WCW, whereas Macho was a pivotal part, but they weren't tying the whole company to him. And you can really argue that, well, okay, well, NWA, they tied it to Flair, but I mean, it was Flair and Sting like moving forward. It was those two, whether they're against each other, whether they're together. I mean, even you look at the NWO stuff and everything, they still, both of them were in key parts, but the company really like doubled down on them, and like they were the anchors of WCW. And Macho, it was just a title reign for Macho, and yeah, he get it again, and it did help him grow and everything. But I don't know. Are you at this date and time looking back and calling Macho Man Randy Savage the icon of the WWF? No.
No. He is an extremely important part of the World Wrestling Federation. One of the top faces, without a shadow of doubt. But the thing is you said it best, an anchor. Because at this point, look at Flair and look at his rivals he's had at this point. Obviously, his greatest rival at the time was Dusty Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
There had been other guys put in that spot. Guys like a Magnum TA, guys like a Nikita Koloff, guys like a Ronnie Garvin. And with all due respect to all of them, they weren't going to be like one of those top drawing rivalries. But Sting, on the other hand, okay, this is a new face. This guy is exciting. He's got charisma. He's appealing to the mass audience. Like, okay, this can be what we go into the 90s as our top guy. And that's exactly what happened. Sting was the face of WCW, especially in the 90s. So,
since you brought him up real quick, I don't think we've ever brought him up on the show. Can I share a quick Nikita Koloff story?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, being in the Charlotte area and surrounding the area and everything, NWA and WCW is very big in this area. Nikita Koloff resides in this area, or did. I don't know if he still does now to this day, but I remember being in middle school, and we had this big, like what's it called when you go to the gym? Like, not convention, like not a pep rally, but what's it called? Like,
to support your team or something?
No, pep rally is more where you support your team, but it's like where you have a guest speaker.
Oh, congregate. I forget. I know what you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
Like,
words are hard, folks.
Yeah.
Especially at this time of night.
Yes.
But he was our guest speaker, and I want to say it was like a dare, like event or something. But like he came, and I mean, even his wrestling was big. I was like, it was like me and a couple of my friends, and we were like, it's Nikita Koloff. It's Nikita Koloff. And the cool thing was my mom worked at the middle school, so like I got to meet him, like, because she called me to the office and just.
So when he first started talking, were your dreams crushed?
I kind of was just like
what?
Well, even then in middle school too, I was like, because I was a very big history buff. Like, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I originally wanted to be a high school history teacher. And I just remember thinking when we found out that was who was coming, I was like, we have a Russian communist come and talk to the kids.
But remember, DadHat, he's now a sympathizer. He got turned. He got turned thanks to the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah. But yeah, brief Nikita Koloff story. But
that's pretty awesome. I love that. Like, and he had a great career too, and went on to do some great things outside of the world of pro wrestling too. So kudos to him. Now, if you look back on that first clash, though, so overall, since fans, I don't know why, but we've always been obsessed with ratings, right? The clash drew a 5.6 rating, going up against WrestleMania 4. not sure what the statistics was on Mania. I believe they had like a higher, if you look at it, like with the buy rates and stuff, I think there was more, but still for people like tuning in to like check something out, that they weren't truly like aware. That's pretty impressive, especially
on a holiday.
on a holiday. Yeah, because there's also this did occur on a holiday as well. But for freaking like you've got 2 wrestling shows and one of them draws like a 5.6. That's nuts, man.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty freaking impressive in my book. So and thus, like I say, a legend's born not only in the Icon Sting, but as well as the Clash of the Champions events. And here thereafter, they're typically like doing them about like every other month at first, and you get like a mix of like Clash like matches and stuff. I mean, it's just the top stars in the NWA competing.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, a lot of the times they would kind of use it as build-ins and build-ups to the pay-per-views, whatever pay-per-view would be coming up at the time. Now, when we go fast forward into 1989, they do it again, where they put a clash up against WrestleMania. This time, WrestleMania 5. Of course, the Mega Powers exploded. But you know what? The NWA was like, they were going balls to the wall because they put up the Clash of the Champions 6 against WrestleMania 5. And in the big main event here, this was the 2 out of 3 falls matchup for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat defending against Ric Flair. So this is a big return matchup from their Chi-Town Rumble matchup they have.
I mean, part of the trilogy. I mean,
yeah, part of the trilogy. It's part of
many consider the best trilogy of matches ever.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at the ratings for this, it only in comparison to the first Clash, it was down. It drew a 4.3, but still, once again, that's pretty damn impressive, especially with like what you're getting. I mean, let me ask you this, DadHat, at the time frame, if you were watching, would you rather see like Hulk Hogan versus Macho Man Randy Savage, or would you rather see Steamboat against Flair?
Adult Justin says Steamboat Flair.
But the kid, obviously.
The young kid, I mean, there's a reason why WWF was like, I mean, it was aimed towards kids and everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, my parent, I mean, I was super young and everything. My parents, even when I had to beg tooth and nail when I got into middle school and high school just to get maybe 2 pay-per-views out of the whole year. Thank you, VHS, because then when they could come to VHS and like I would buy them then. I remember at one point having the entire like 1998 WWF pay-per-view
nice.
like on VHS, and then like I started like getting every WrestleMania on VHS.
Bro, I'm still waiting for the FBI to kick down my door because I copied the shit out of all the tapes I read.
Oh yeah,
the 2 VCRs hooked up. That was what consisted of most of my wrestling library.
Yeah, but I mean, as a kid, I mean, even though I mean, it's that you look at that, it's like 2 big giant comic book characters like colliding. I mean, and they presented it that way. Look at the graphics. Look at everything. Like, I mean, it's 2 like titans fighting is the way they presented Hogan and Savage. So, but I mean, Justin now, like, yeah, it's Flair Steamboat. I mean,
right. Yeah, it's a compelling argument. I mean, like, definitely you can't deny that story that the WWF put together of the Mega Powers. Like, the build for that was amazing. I mean, it's still one of the best stories in WWF history. Now, when we look early on at the clashes, it was what I always found fascinating about it was they all had like taglines for different shows, and they're like, for example, the second Clash of Champions was Miami Mayhem. After that, you get Fall Brawl, which we all know Fall Brawl would eventually become a pay-per-view.
Let me throw a question at you. Do you think this was where WWF took their idea of in your house? Clash Champions, Fall Brawl, Clash Champions,
It's interesting because if you think about in your house, like because really in 95 is when that was introduced, and that was really when we finally got to the monthly pay-per-views. Because at that time it was only like, you were getting 4 a year, maybe 5 or 5 when you had King of the Ring. and I think they saw an opportunity for revenue, and then like also let's put on like a shorter card. Let's just do 2 hours. We'll only charge like I think they were $20 at the time back in the day for In Your House.
That was a lot though back then.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, 100%.
For a one thing.
But I feel like yeah, you could say there's some responsibility for that, I suppose. Because one thing I think you do got to keep in mind is at that time frame when that was introduced in '95, that's when the clashes were starting to get like phased out.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Eric Bischoff's even historically said himself, like, why the fuck are we doing like 4 or 5 of these a year and giving them away for free? So it's like, hey, let's just go to the pay-per-view monthly model, and there we were. But yeah, there was some. I thought there was some fascinating names for like the first several clashes, and it, like I say, it was interesting how later on, like you would get that name into like a pay per view. Like for example, another one you got was the Guts and Glory, which was the tagline for Great American Bash '90, if you remember. So just to name some few. Let me ask you this: what are some of your favorite Clash of the Champions matches? Because there's been a ton of them throughout.
I mean, there's a ton, and I know we're gonna glance over several of them. One that I'm going through it, looking at a list and everything. And I meant to go back and try to watch this and everything, but I mean, how can you not have interest? It's from it's a later one. It's from 1996, Clash of the Champions 33. Triple threat match for the WCW tag team titles. Harlem Heat versus the Steiner brothers versus Sting and Lex Luger. I mean, come on.
Oh yeah.
But if we're going back in the day, I mean, you have a great 2 out of 3 falls tag team match with Flair and Arn versus the Hollywood Blondes. At a later one, you get the Hollywood Blondes against each other, where you get Stunning Steve Austin versus Brian Pillman. I really remember this match from Clash of the Champions 17 and 91, Sting versus Ravishing Rick Rude for the WCW United States Championship.
Great match.
Like that's a big one. Like it's I don't know why that one sticks out so much to me.
Well, I think that's where Rude won the first U.S. title too, as well.
Yeah. Dangerous Alliance.
Yeah, that's really the start of that, the Dangerous Alliance. So
yeah,
that's a great matchup. And Rude and Sting was one of those great rivalries in WCW.
You get in '94. People forget these two even really interacted. Stunning Steve Austin versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Like, and then again in the later ones, there's a maybe this is why I think of Battle Bowl, because it's a match for the Battle Bowl ring, and it's DDP versus Eddie Guerrero.
Ooh, yeah.
So maybe that's why. But I mean,
DDP and Eddie always had great matches.
Hall of Famers. I mean, they should. But I mean, there's so many. I don't know. I mean, those are probably some of the big ones that, like, when I was looking through the list, I'm like, okay, I remember that one. I really remember that one. I remember that triple threat tag team match. I just haven't seen it in forever. But I mean, they treated it like a Mania, but for free. So
it's the best part.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of them that I kind of have on my radar. I mean, the consensus, you could easily say everybody knows Sting and Flair.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the greatest Clash of the Champions match of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, I even think Sting said in interviews that's his favorite match of all time. So, I mean, that just goes without saying. We all know Steamboat and Flair, like we mentioned. I mean, that was part of that trilogy. There was another match that happened early on that got a lot of praise, and we're going back to Clash of the Champions 9 in New York. This was the infamous I Quit match between Ric Flair and Terry Funk.
Terry Funk, yep.
And their rivalry, and that was an incredible rivalry there. Following up from Flair's rivalry with Steamboat.
Yeah.
Which hot take,
you get Steamboat
Flair in '89 was like one of his best runs.
You get Flair, who was going up against a technician like Steamboat, and then all of a sudden you're moving into a match with Flair versus, someone that's so much more violent.
Oh yeah, absolutely. one of the things I loved Dad had about Clash of the Champions, especially early on, was you would just see matches like you didn't know you needed in your life, but then it was like, oh my God, I'm so glad they booked that. And a lot of times you would see kind of like a lot of like there would be some main events where a tag team wrestler would get a shot at the world title. One of those first ones I remember was from Clash of Champions 14 when a very young, long before he was Big Papa Pump, Scott Steiner got it to challenge Ric Flair for the World Heavyweight Championship.
Oh,
And
Scotty.
this was great. And I always have loved Scott Steiner, but if you give me like early Scott Steiner, man, when he was just doing crazy shit like the Frankensteiner and the Steiner screwdriver and stuff. And I love Big Papa Pump, don't get me wrong, man. But early Scott Steiner, there's just something special about that, in my opinion.
I mean, he always touted like he's a genetic freak, but I mean, he was a freak of nature
super
forever. I mean, yeah, super athlete. I mean, look at the stuff. Look at the style. I mean, Steiner lines. Look at the. I'm so used to saying a Hurricane Rana now. The what the hell, Frankensteiner.
The Frankensteiner.
I'm just so used to saying Hurricane Rana.
Scotty will come on here and he'll raise hell.
And look at this, the Steiner screwdriver. I mean, like freak of nature athlete.
But it was cool to see these guys though get like put to the test. Like, okay, now you're getting put up against in the main event against like a Ric Flair. Another one that comes to mind too. You go to the next Clash at 15. It was Ric Flair against Bobby Eaton in a 2 out of 3 falls matchup, which was a great. Oh, it's great. It's wonderful. And this is right when Bobby Eaton, they're kind of starting to push him as like a single star because he'd already won the television title. Had quite a bit of momentum going into this matchup. But that's another one I loved. Now this next one, DadHat, I gotta admit, it is a guilty pleasure, but I think in the annals of time, a lot of pro wrestling fans will look back on this and just they'll take some enjoy out of it. And this is probably the only time on this show where we're ever going to mention Fan Hammer, because this matchup was Fan Hammer against Cactus Jack in a Falls Count Anywhere matchup at Clash of the Champions 18. Now, what was interesting about this is they literally took the concept of Falls Count Anywhere and like they went, because I remember watching it as a kid because they weren't doing this on television for wrestling, man.
Yeah.
It showed them like fighting in the audience and fighting in the in the backstage area. I mean, yeah, it had been done in like Memphis and other territories, whatever, but this on a national scale, like a young XLJ had never seen anything like this. Let's put it that way. And I just remember them fighting out, and like I think the match ended in like a in like a barn, like where they were keeping like horses and stuff.
Yeah.
And just the hilarity of this, it was a sight to see. I think that's one you have to kind of consider in the history of Clash of the Champions. Another great one. Oh, go ahead.
I'm saying if you also go back, like you go back to the first one in '88, there's a killer tag team match with Arn and Tully versus Lex Luger and Barry Windham. So all 4 horsemen, no pun intended. Actually, yeah, I'll do pun intended. All 4 of them horsemen at some point in their career. That's a good.
Which is interesting because it's the transitional period between Luger and Windham. Because at this point, Luger's the babyface, and if I remember correctly, too, I think is this where Windham turned, maybe, and I think joined the Horsemen. I think they won the tag titles. I think that was later on, but I do believe that happened at a Clash.
There's so many. I mean, that's the thing about anything. You mentioned Horsemen, like I'm assuming there's a turn and a twist with them. Like,
yeah, no kidding, man. But another match I'd like to highlight here real quickly was this is from the Clash 19. The build up to this tag team match was awesome, and it was part of the tag team tournament at the time for the NWA tag titles. The Steiner brothers against Terry Gordy and Dr. Death Steve Williams, the Miracle Finals connection. I love that. You talk about big kiddos. This was big meaty men slapping meat before that even really existed. Okay,
without a doubt.
Like that is good old JR would say is a slobber knocker. It's a phenomenal tag team matchup. absolutely love it. You mentioned it earlier, the Hollywood Blondes against Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, that 2 out of 3 falls match. You could easily say a star-making performance for Steve Austin.
Yeah.
I mean, such a huge night for him, and Brian Pillman as well too. I mean, just Hollywood Blondes was the hottest act at that time.
I'm a huge Pillman fan.
Love Pillman, and he had some great moments and some infamous moments on the clashes throughout the years.
Yeah.
Also, I think you got to note Clash of the Champions 27 in '94. There was a unification match for the international title and the world heavyweight title between Ric Flair and Sting, another Flair-Sting matchup, which would lead into their matchup. And then a couple cruiserweight matches from the latter clashes I think that really you should give some attention to. And these are Dean Malenko matches, by the way. But from 33, it's Rey Mysterio against Dean Malenko.
I mean, yeah, well, you can't argue the chemistry there.
Yeah, for the cruiserweight title, wonderful matchup. And then also from 34, there's a opening match is Dean Malenko against the Ultimo Dragon. I mean,
that match is insane.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. But like, that's just a sampling. There's so many other great Clash of Champions matches. Like, seriously, do yourself a favor, go over to Peacock, YouTube, whatever you got to do to watch some of these great matches. But DadHat, I want to ask you here, what are some of your favorite moments throughout the Clash? Because there's a lot of great moments that's happened at the Clash too.
I mean, for me, it's one of those things where like I haven't seen them in so long that like I remember the matches more than the moments, to be honest.
Okay.
Like I mean, when you said Clash, like I told you last week, I thought the entrance, but the first match was that Flair Sting from the first one. Like it's that's what, but I don't know if I have a moment. Like,
well, I can tell you this: there's several. I think throughout.
As you say them, I'll probably be like, I'm an idiot.
Yeah. So here's a couple that come to my mind, and I highlighted. Of course, first and foremost, the arrival of Sting. I mean, it's the biggest Clash moment. We could talk about that ad nauseum on this episode, but I mean, Sting's arrival in the main event scene sank it to none. But I also think what's interesting too, you fast forward a couple years later, Sting getting kicked out of the Four Horsemen.
That's right.
It happened at the Clash, and yes, that's right. Sting was a part of the Four Horsemen for a very brief time. And that was kind of to lead into like that big matchup where it was obviously going to be Sting's going to finally get the world title and be the next top babyface. But at that same Clash of the Champions, there's the infamous injury Sting accidentally sustained when he gets knocked off the cage and knocks him out for a couple months. And WCW has to change plans, and thus they insert Lex Luger into that spot until Sting gets healed up and can challenge later on at the Great American Bash.
I remember that so much because like I was a huge fan. Again, we talked about having wrestling things on VHS. WCW, and it was in like '98 when they did it was everything. The logo was all WCW/NWO, and they did the Superstar Series DVD, or I keep saying DVDs, VHSs, and there's one for Sting, and it's him without paint, sitting down, and it's just, I mean, it's really just it's Tony Schiavone narrating them, but very like you can tell that they were like, cool, this doesn't cost a lot to make. Like we can just a couple interviews things from Sting and then mostly just clips here and there, but him being taken to down the ramp and Flair rushing out of the cage. And I just remember Sting talking about like, he's gonna jump on me, he's gonna jump on me, and even though he knew his knee was shot, but yeah, I forgot that was there.
Yeah, that was a huge moment early on in Clashes. Here's one that kind of probably gets forgotten about, but I got to tell you, DadHat, Child XLJ was enthralled with this because this happens in '91. There had been this buildup of Sting receiving these mysterious packages and getting dumped by guys like Abdul the Butcher and Cactus Jack. Well, at one of the Clashes, we found out who was behind all this, and it was, in fact, Sting's former best friend, the Total Package Lex Luger, who at the time was the WCW champion. And that leading into their matchup at Super Brawl 2 for the World Heavyweight Championship. That was one I always loved those storylines too. And DadHat, there was a lot of like appearances and debuts that happened at the Clash over the years. This I find to be very fascinating. Did you know Andre the Giant's final television appearance was actually at a Clash of the Champions? Yeah.
No.
He was actually now he wasn't like this was kind of pre-taped before. At the time, it was like a anniversary special for TBS, like as far as wrestling on TBS, and they had like different legends like showing up, like they like pretty much like kind of had like a red carpet, so to speak, if you will. And sure enough, Andre the Giant was actually featured on this, and like I say, it would be the last televised appearance of Andre the Giant was at a Clash of the Champions.
I did not know that.
Would have never dreamed that. Mentioned some debuts. We got the WCW debut of one Jesse the Body Ventura, where it was revealed like he was going to be the new announcer in 1992.
That's still weird. Like that's a him and WCW as a like Will and I have covered some different pay-per-views and stuff, and it's him on commentary with JR, and it's a weird.
It's very It's a weird dynamic. I mean, that was lasted for a good year at least.
Him as a commentator, he was much better with McMahon.
I always thought I was okay with him and Tony Schiavone. I thought him and Schiavone actually wasn't a bad team.
Yeah, I would rather have him with Schiavone over JR.
Or JR, yeah, totally agree. And I love JR, but it just I don't know, it was just it didn't mix. You know. Speaking of announcers and debuts, Bobby the Brain Heenan would make his WCW debut at a Clash of the Champions. I'll never forget that too, when like Mean Gene brings him out and they're just
what are you doing here?
Yeah, what are you doing here? Like, you're following me here? What the hell? Speaking of Bobby Heenan, one of my favorite moments of Bobby's and Clash of the Champions as well, because it was just so off the wall. Because I remember seeing this as a kid and I was like, what just happened? This was 1996. Bobby Heenan, this is at Caesar's Palace. And the way that their setup was is they had the announce table was literally right up against the apron of the ring. With the way
I used to hate that as a kid.
Yeah, I thought I'm not a fan of this, but anyways, the matchup in hand was Eddie Guerrero against Flying Brian Pillman, and this is like the
I don't know this match.
Oh yeah, this is the loose cannon Brian Pillman. Okay, this is the start of that character, and like Brian Pillman's already going off the wall with his promos and just everything else. Well, there's a moment in the matchup where like they go to the outside and I don't know, I'm going to say it was probably done purposefully, but Brian does like a baseball slide and he's sliding to get away from Eddie, but he goes right through the announcers, right? And then he grabs a hold of Bobby to like use him as a shield against Eddie Guerrero. And it just like, it wasn't, you can tell it wasn't planned or anything because Bobby literally off the air, like his mic is like fell off his head and he's just like, what the fuck are you doing?
I do remember that. I remember
because you couldn't break Bobby Heenan, man. Like you could, Bobby Heenan's like one of the all-time greats, you know. And like I just remember seeing this as a kid, and he walks off for like a good 30 seconds to gather himself because he's just pissed and like frazzled by it. And he comes back and like he apologizes uncharacteristically of Bobby Heenan. Oh man, I always that was one of my moments I always stuck out for me. Love Bobby, love Brian Pillman. Of course, I mentioned debuts. Maybe the greatest WCW debut of all time did take place at a Clash of the Champions because, my friend, it was pretty shocking. We got to talk about the debut of the Shockmaster.
Oh God,
that did happen at a Clash of the Champions. Poor Uncle Fred.
I just remember the. Okay,
it's hard to.
This is gonna go in a little bit into DadHat psyche. Okay, first time I saw the whole Shockmaster thing, right, and the falling through the wall, it wasn't that bothered me. It really wasn't. It was the damn glittery Stormtrooper helmet.
Or Ole Anderson's ridiculous voice.
I was like, why is there a Stormtrooper helmet spray painted with glitter?
There were so many things going on here. It was like
other part of me, I mean, even as a kid, I'm like, aren't they going to get sued? Like,
yeah. I think I was mostly confused. Because like I remember like the build up was like, okay, this is gonna be some badass joining up Sting and the British Bulldog to go against Sid and Vader and Harlem Heat at the Fall Brawl that year.
Shockmaster.
But the Shockmaster, it's like, what the fuck is this?
Didn't later they turn him into like a freaking construction worker?
Yes, they did. Because
Still calling him the Shockmaster.
Yes, they did.
He was an electrician.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking. I mean, it's just honestly, here's the thing, DadHat. If that didn't happen, I think like people forget about this gimmick other than the stupidity of the Stormtrooper helmet, but it doesn't become as infamous as it does because of this moment. I just remember it popping Jesse Ventura, and every time the Shockmaster would be like, he'd be on commentary for Shock. He would always get in a joke or two there about like that debut, man. It was just crazy.
And Sting was so energetic and into that announcement too, announcing him. Like he gave like every bit of energy in his body to announce him. And then
I love how the announcers are like, "All right," and then it's like, "Oh, fuck." There's a pause there too. Oh god, man! But that was another great Clash moment. Let me tell you. Well, you mentioned Steamboat earlier and Steve Austin. That was actually at the time, up until Steamboat when he came back, X amount years later. That was actually Steamboat's last televised match. Was at that Clash against Austin. Because he would go on later on to get, of course, that infamous injury and not wrestle. The thing, let me tell you, the one thing that pissed me off about that match was it was a great matchup, but the whole fucking time, all they're talking about, who's the mystery man that fucking busted Hulk Hogan's kneecaps? By the way, as it says here, I am the real mystery man. I'm the one who took out fucking Terry's kneecaps. I wish I should have done a better job back in '94, but I was a little guy.
Who was that ended up being?
It actually ended up being Brutus Beefcake, believe it or not.
Okay.
Thus, he goes down the path of 20 different names.
I have this weird, like, it's like a mental block, but I have flashes of this storyline about someone taking out Hogan's knee with a pipe. But then it starts like blending in with the Black Scorpion storyline. And I'm like, no, like
they both stuck, so it makes sense.
It was like, no, it wasn't Sting, it was Hogan. Yeah, but like it's just this weird mental thing, like with that storyline. So you saying it, I was like, okay, I didn't just imagine that.
Nope, it happened. Oh, it was a thing. It's just a damn shame that didn't take out his legs and he never wrestled again. But I said what I said. I want to tell you, Dad, I want to tell you one of my favorite memories from early on, or from Clashes. A lot of people forget about this, but I don't know why, but I love this storyline. It was so dumb, but the infamous Colonel Robert Parker and Scary Sherry, Sensational Sherry, the wedding that would take place at one of the Clash of the Champions that happened at the Little White Wedding Chapel when they were in Vegas. And I remember they had built this up because there was like a clash where they did a 6-person tag where it was Harlem Heat and Sherry against Colonel Parker, Bunkhouse Buck, and Dirty Dick Slater, right? And the story was like Sherry hits her head, and during the match it becomes enamored and falls in love with Colonel Parker, and it starts their whole relationship and stuff. And the wedding, like any wrestling wedding, it ended badly as we got the return of Medusa, who just so happened to say, like, after throwing the belt in the garbage, they decided, okay, let's go ahead and like say she's Colonel Parker's like, mistress or whatever. Go figure.
I love me some Sherry Martel.
I do too. Now, this last moment I want to talk about DadHat, I think is very important because it did take place at the very last Clash. But did you realize at the last Clash, that was officially the 1-year birthday of the NWO? Right?
Really?
So they actually had their birthday party was at the last Clash of the Champions. And they pretty much had run roughshod, as they always did. I think the main event that evening was a tag match with Scott Hall and Macho Man against DDP and Luger, I believe. And they're in the ring celebrating. And then we get this big moment where it's like we see lightning in the arena. It gets dark. and up in the rafters there is Sting. And that iconic music plays, which I believe was for the first time, and you get that voiceover of the little kid talking,
That was the creepiest thing ever.
Right? And then he's got the crow with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget the ending shot. Like, it ends up the crow flies down to the ring and is sitting on the ropes, and the NWO's just looking on like, what? And just setting up for like Sting eventually coming back at Starrcade that year.
Yeah.
But like, crazy that's the last real moment at the Clash of Champions history, but I think it just cements the legacy of the Clash of Champions.
Sting starts it, Sting ends it.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, as we're closing up here talking about the Clash, I want to ask you, I mentioned legacy. What do you think is the overall legacy of the Clash of the Champions?
I think it's just being a showcase of it's a good way of, if you're a wrestling fan, if you're not a wrestling fan, if you want to get into wrestling or you just stumble across it, like, here's what the NWA, here's what WCW has to offer. Here's our talent, and we're not asking you to pay for it.
Yeah, this is what we got.
If you like it, then great. We hope that you will continue to support us and buy pay-per-views or come buy a ticket to an actual show. But this is our way of saying, give us a chance.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think you nailed it right on the head there. And I think, like I say, what always fascinated me the most about Clashes is just the origin story of how it started out of spite. You know, and it's interesting the timing of this episode, DadHat, because I don't know if you saw this news or not, but it was just announced that what I do believe the first time in these companies' histories that WWE is actually going to run a show in the same town AEW is running their World's End pay-per-view. They're running a show in Orlando the exact same day. So that being said, how long is it before we really start seeing? Because I don't think really AEW has kind of countered WWE in programming yet. We have seen WWE kind of step on the tippy toes of AEW, but I don't think AEW's really done that yet. Do you think AEW at some point is going to go down that road?
I guess they could. I don't know why right now you would attempt to when WWE is so white hot. Like they are firing on all cylinders right now, and we see other than the people who are diehard AEW, blind to everything. Like, somebody could take literally a shit in the ring, but they're going to be like, it was the best shit ever. But right now, like, why would you? This is my mentality with pretty much. It's not just wrestling; it's everything. Like, literally, stay in your lane, do your own thing. Like, don't worry about other people. Do your own thing. Like,
I'm glad they haven't done that yet. I don't want to. I feel like at some point it is going to happen, just out of, like, once again, that keyword is spite. But I hope it doesn't. Like, if you're going to do it and it, like, makes sense to do it, like, and you already had a show, like, for example, this was already booked, I mean, I wouldn't change things around or do anything, but I wouldn't purposely book a show like on the same day. Like, I don't get the balls of booking like a freaking pay-per-view up against WrestleMania, because you will get your ass handed to you.
It's like when they try to do things like, what is it, Collision on the same nights they have WWE has a Saturday pay-per-view. It's like, come on, like.
Well, I want to give AEW credit because they've moved. Like, if you look at SummerSlam this past year, they did move Collision to like a 5 o'clock slot.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense, because it's like, we're not going to be able to compete with them. Like,
No.
I'm like you.
I do that. That's
focus
fine.
And stay in your lane. That is the key. And one last thing I want to mention here: we're talking the legacy of the Clash. Often, like, imitated but never duplicated, like, because throughout the years you look, because WWE has the rights to the name, and they did produce some Clash of Champions pay-per-views, which just they don't live up to what the Clash really was. That was more of kind of like a Night of Champions type of thing.
Yeah, they kind of, and they changed the name too, which makes sense. Like, it's a night where, I mean, most pay-per-views, the titles are defended anyway, but like, it's where literally every title will be and must be defended.
But Also, you do have AEW introduce the Battle of the Belts over the years, which I have to say.
I
Now,
went to
the
the first
last one they did was really good. Probably the best one they ever did. But the rest of them, and this is coming from an AEW diehard. I love AEW. I'm one of those guys who would say probably, hey, that's good stuff, even though they shit in the ring. I'll even admit the Battle of the Belts is the most pointless fucking show they have.
I went to the very first one.
Did you really? No kidding.
Yeah, it was in Charlotte.
Was that where it was Cody and Sammy, right?
It was the one. It was supposed to be, and Cody got COVID, and it was Dustin.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, I remember that.
And I was pissed because I wasn't gonna get to see Cody.
Yeah. Well, someday that dream is going to come true.
No,
friend.
I did. I saw him at the
Oh, you did?
Rumble.
Oh yeah, duh. Of course, you did see him at the Rumble. So
Yeah. I would have been able to see him a lot better at at Battle of the Belts, but yeah, I mean it was pointless. The only thing I really remember about it was the match with Dustin because it was cool to see him.
Yeah.
And Jade Cargill's match.
Yeah, I wish they would utilize that more because I don't even think. I mean, I could be wrong here, but I don't even think the AEW titles have ever been defended on that show.
And FTR. Well, so what they did at least with the first one was like Jade's match and Hangman. Hangman was champion at the time. They were dark matches after it went off the air.
Oh, okay.
So they were there. I also remember that was the time that one of the FTR members like cut his arm on the the metal part of the ring post and like gashed his arm open.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that now. Yep, you're right. Yeah. But like I say, I think at the end of the day, the legacy of the Clash of Champions is it was just one of those once in a lifetime type of events. How it came to be and what it turned out to be, to me, is amazing. And it's honestly probably one of my most fondest events that WCW ever put on, outside of maybe like Starrcade and Havoc and the Bash. Like that was right up there for me. I loved Clash of the Champions. Mm-hmm. And I think at the end of the day, all of us old heads, all of us old WCW fans, it is one of those events that we truly cherish.
Yeah. It's I mean, there's wrestling fans now that don't probably never even heard of or seen anything Clash of the Champions other than what WWE's put on with them.
And I don't think they'll really get that experience of like what we got, knowing we were getting a pay-per-view for free.
Yeah.
Like, because shit, you can buy Peacock for $5 a month, and like that's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket,
Yeah.
Yeah. Good times.
We're old.
We are, my friend.
Yeah. Well, folks, that was Clash of the Champions. Good job, XLJ.
Oh, well, thank you. Like I say, it's something I hold near and dear to my heart, and I hope all of you can get some inspiration from this episode and go out and watch you some Clash of the Champions.
Well, we've got some big news.
Yeah, we do.
For Wreckage. Before we do that, let's Will's not here, but Will has informed us what the next episode is. So let's get your button ready. Plug a palooza. We'll knock that out. And then we'll get into the next episode, which will lead into our news. So First off, XLJ, where can they find you? What's going on with Cold TV? Give them all the good stuff.
So we got quite a bit once again going on with Cold TV. It has been a busy couple of weeks for Cold TV, DadHat, and it's continuing on this week with all the program we got coming to you. Of course, we got PW60, a brand new episode of that came out on Monday. We also got a brand new episode, well, depending on the time you air this, but this upcoming week on Tuesday, we'll have a brand new episode of I'm Your Huckleberry. And this is a very special one. This is when we were in Cleveland and we went to this place called Melt. And I got to tell you, DadHat, this place, I'd heard about this place for about the past 15 years. Good buddy of mine had been hyping it up, and this place lived up to the hype. So essentially, put it to you this way, it's like a gourmet grilled cheese restaurant. Like anything you can think of grilled cheese. Like my grilled cheese had a freaking pierogi on it, if that tells you anything.
Interesting.
Yeah. But that episode will be dropping this Tuesday. And this week, we have got a couple prediction shows because this upcoming weekend of professional wrestling is going to be huge. as we've got GCW Homecoming as well as All In. And for the first time on Cold TV history, we will be doing a GCW prediction show for the Homecoming shows this upcoming weekend, as well as our All In prediction show. But all that is all over on Cold TV. And of course, you can find me over on Cold TV, as well as you can find me here on World Championship Wreckage's YouTube channel. Also, working on it. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Maybe get a new episode of Fantasy Warfare coming soon as well. So be on the lookout for that.
Love me some Fantasy Warfare.
Oh yeah, and it's going to be a fun episode too. I'm really excited with the guests that we potentially got coming on. It's going to be really, really fun. You're going to want to check that out. And of course, you can find me on all socials under XLJ the OG. You can find me on the TikTok. You can find me over on the Twitter, X, whatever the hell we're calling it, Instagram, Facebook, MySpace. No, maybe not MySpace. But anyways, you can find me there.
OnlyFans, XLJ's OnlyFans.
I can tell you this, DadHat, you're always going to be in my top 8. If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. Well, folks, you can find me all social media platforms, DadHat Wrestling. You can find World Championship Wreckage on all social media platforms. Again, give us a subscribe, give us a like, leave us a comment. We love the engagement. We love putting out the content for you. We're always throwing around ideas, different things. What can we do? Can we, change that, move? Like, what can we do to make the channel better? So we appreciate the engagement. Well, first we'll hit you with what Will's topic is next week. It was his turn to pick. Since he's not here, he let us know. We are going to be talking about the evolution of hardcore wrestling.
Oh.
From the territories through, different companies like GCW and XPW. Of course, I'm sure we've talked about it before on other episodes. I'm sure ECW will be in there some, but we probably try not to focus so much on that since we've discussed it on other episodes. But the evolution of hardcore wrestling is next week. And that leads us into some breaking news. Well, folks, if you saw our last episode, we had a very special guest on there. I have deemed her the Queen of Extreme on TikTok. Cakeface Carly. She loves her deathmatch wrestling. She's covering amazing things and doing great content for GCW over on TikTok. She's doing some stuff with Cole TV on PW60. If I'm not incorrect, she's going to be on your GCW prediction show.
She is, yep.
But now she is part of Wreckage. She is going to be taking the 4th chair here with XLJ and the Will Gray and myself. So we are excited. We're excited to have Carly joining us and everything. She is awesome to interact with, and she loves wrestling so much, which is, at the end of the day, we're fans. That's what we love talking about it. Mm-hmm. And it's also a third person that can give me shit. Then that's the type of people that I like to have around me, because if you can give me shit, that means that we're friends. So, So Cakeface Carly is now officially a host on Wreckage.
It's exciting, and she is an amazing person. She puts out such great content. Like, she honestly, I think, is like a breath of fresh air that we've needed in the internet wrestling community. Yeah. It's nice to see like some original like content coming out, and like she does a great job of that, like with her stuff she does with the makeup and like and what she's doing with like talking about deathmatch wrestling and stuff, and focusing on stuff that doesn't get nearly as much love as it should, like GCW. So super excited to have her on board with us. That's going to be awesome. So now we're like the 4 horse people or something, I guess. Right? That's the politically correct way to say it.
I want to make a shirt.
We just throw this up.
I'm gonna make a shirt with 4, but it's gonna have everybody's heads on the fingers.
I like it.
That's weird. That's weird. Anyway, folks, this was another episode of Wreckage here on World Championship Wreckage's YouTube channel. And as always, we are going to end our show with wise words from the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes himself.
Yeah, baby, I got one more thing to say. Your gas tank is full. Your dipstick is in. Your windows washed. Y'all come back and see me again.